Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of How to Live to 200. I'm T.A. McCann, serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and advocate for the quantified self. What is biohacking? If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you're at least familiar with the concept or know what that means. Biohackers are an emerging group of enthusiasts, many of whom come from the tech industry, looking to apply the latest concepts of disruption, experimentation, and innovation to the broader notion of health. To biohackers, taking a daily vitamin or working out 30 minutes just isn't enough. They're looking for the latest enhancements and advancements. Maybe you've heard of cryotherapy or float tanks. This is the kind of stuff these people are into. Forget fish oil. Maybe the secret to living longer and better lies in NAD or even nicotine. On this episode, we talked to Martin Tobias, the CEO of Bulletproof Labs, and someone who's certainly on the frontier of biohacking. Martin is quite a colorful guy. To give you an idea, his latest company was the product of a poker game. But he's also a successful entrepreneur, and he's been a prolific member of the Seattle entrepreneurial community for decades. He's co-founded multiple companies, led numerous startups, and worked as an executive at Microsoft and even a venture capitalist. Lately, Martin has been interested in biohacking. His company, Bulletproof Labs, is a health club unlike any other. It features the latest, most premium gym equipment and access to the most cutting-edge experimental therapies. Bulletproof Labs has only one location in Santa Monica, California, and some pretty select clientele. But we think you'll enjoy learning about the latest trends biohackers are betting on in an effort to extend and improve their lives. And now, this is how to live to 200. So Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, TA.
So tell me, as a tech entrepreneur, tell me about your journey from being a tech entrepreneur to being the CEO of Bulletproof Labs.
Well, it was a long-ish journey, and the problem or the proximate cause of it, like many things in life, was a poker game. And so I sold my last...
Did you win the bet or you lose the bet?
I'll explain. So I sold my last software company, was it 5 years ago or something like that, and I had been taking 2 or 3 years off, and I was mostly just surfing and hanging around with my kids. And I started doing some new things, started trying to meditate again, and doing some listening to podcasts, trying to get smart about some areas that I didn't know much about. And when I started meditating again, I was using a couple of apps, but I was thinking to myself, oh my God, there's got to be technology that makes meditation better, because this meditation thing, it's great, but sitting in a cave for 40 years, humming a song or something, that takes too fucking long. There's got to be somebody that's hacked meditation, because I want the benefits, but I don't want to spend the time. And that night, I listened to Bulletproof Radio, Dave Asprey's podcast, and he was talking about this program called 40 Years of Zen he has, which is down in Kent. It's a week-long intensive neural feedback thing. And the goal of that project is to, in 1 week, reprogram your brain to give you the benefits of 40 years of meditation, but doing it in a week. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm looking for. A technology hack to make myself, enlightened in a week, and all it costs is money. So I call them up and I go, okay, it sounds great. How much is it? And they go, $15,000 for a week. And I'm like, okay. Well, I've got $15,000, but maybe I'll think about it. This is on Wednesday. Thursday night is the CEO poker game with all those guys, Sack and Lou and all those guys. We've been playing this game in Seattle for, 15 years. I go to the poker game. Guess how much money I win?
$15,000.
$15,000, exactly, to the dollar. So the universe delivers me the money. I call Dave on Friday. I go, I'm coming to 40 Years of Zen. Here's your $15,000. So I go there, and that week Dave just happened to be there. And so, I got kind of involved in the Bulletproof ecosystem because of the 40 Years of Zen program. And when I was there, I asked him if he was, I thought he was a pretty smart guy. I thought what he was doing was interesting. I said, are you raising money? Turns out they had a round open, so I just wrote him a blank check without doing any diligence, which is so fun. And but it's turned out well. I mean, he's a smart guy. I'm like, here, have some money. Let's go have some fun together. And then I started listening to more of his podcasts, and he has at his house like 10,000 square foot thing he calls Alpha Labs, where he's been buying a lot of regenerative medicine stuff, exercise hacks, cryotherapy, float tanks, all these things, and trying it all out for a long time. He's been the chairman of the Palo Alto Longevity Institute for like 20 years. He created the term biohacking. So he's been, he tells people he's going to live to 180 and has a whole formula scientifically backed of how he's going to do it. And I got kind of intrigued with that. Not that I want to live to be 180, but I'm like, sure, would I like to be more vital? Would I like to, have more energy and stuff like that, and work out, less? I've been a guy that's worked out my whole life. I've done the Ironman, and I like sports and stuff, but I don't necessarily like the time that you have to spend on doing that. So I went to his house and I tried out a couple of those machines, and I'm like, oh, I love all this shit. I'm going to buy it all for my house. So I literally put in orders for $300,000 worth of stuff for my house. I was going to buy a cryotherapy machine, a Vasper machine, an ARX machine, a float tank, and all these things. And we can go through the different technologies. And I told Dave, that's what I'm going to do because I have a big house. You have a big house. Let's just buy the stuff. And he goes, no, Martin, you don't want to do that, because all your friends are going to come to your house, and it's going to be a pain in the ass. TA is going to be there all the time using your machines. And what I want to do is...
Only the one in Hawaii.
Only the one in Hawaii.
Just to make it in Hawaii.
yeah, I'll put it at my house in Hawaii. And he goes, actually... so many people have wanted access to this technology that I've had, that I'm thinking about turning it into a retail experience and trying to find a way to make a membership sort of model for this. And, I'm building one down in Santa Monica, and what you should do is come help me turn this into a business so that all of our friends can go there and not bother us at our houses. And I'm like, great, sounds great. And you had me at Santa Monica because it's by the beach. So that's how I got kind of sucked in. It was, just a poker game that turned into helping my friends, live healthier, happier, more vital lives. And when I started this whole thing, kind of to get back to your longevity topic, many of the claims that I hear from the machines and the things that Dave was talking about doing sounded fairy dust, like total bullshit. And I'm like, so the way I'm going to figure out if any of this shit works is I'm going to take my baseline, bunch of biomarkers, and then I'm going to do the things, and I'm going to measure everything. Right. And so I started measuring my biomarkers, including, testosterone, IGH levels, cortisol, HSCRP, telomere length, stuff like that. Trying some of the different things, stem cell therapies, we can get into all the different things. But basically over the last 8 months, the summary of it is 4 or 5 of my major biomarkers have actually reversed in a pretty material way. My telomeres in 8 months have gotten 19 years longer. So
yeah, I read about that. You're 37 in your telomeres now.
37 in my telomeres, and that was about 3 months ago.
34 in my blood.
You're 34 in your blood. Oh, good.
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. I'd like to do that test too. And I just did another telomere test like 2 weeks ago, and I don't know what the results are, but I'm expecting them to be even less than the 37. I expect them to be around 32.
So maybe you could tell everybody, like, what's a telomere?
Sure. So, when you're talking about things like longevity and health and vitality, you need to understand. You need to pick what measurements you're going to use to measure, vitality and health and things like that. And one of those that is commonly used is telomere length. And what telomeres are the ends of your DNA strands. And every time a cell divides, the telomere gets slightly shorter. And over a lifetime, your telomere length is roughly correlated to your physical age. So if you are 53 years old, you should test the length of your telomeres. They should be about 53 years old. If you've lived a really hard life, burned the candle hard on both ends, you might be 57, 56, something like that. But there are databases that relate length of telomere to cell age. And so there hasn't been a lot of research into what happens if you regrow your telomeres, but it's basically something that degrades over time, just like normal hormone levels degrade. Hormones peak at late 20s and are down 2% a year over year after that. So medicine has said that's sort of the normal course of aging, and that's what happens to telomeres is that they get shorter over time, all the time. And but what they do know is that shorter telomeres make for less resilient cells. They know that as telomeres get to be a certain shortness, the cell becomes weaker and weaker, and that's one of the things in aging that makes you susceptible to cancer and all these things. So there's a lot of research around short telomeres being bad because the cells are less resilient. Now, what there isn't any research on yet is what happens if you regrow your telomeres, right. Because no one's done that really at scale. And
but it's more about not regrowing them at this point. It's slowing the decay, slowing the shortening.
If you can slow the shortening, but they know for sure short telomeres make for weak cells, mean susceptibility to disease. So the inverse should be true, that if you slow your aging of your cells on average, or if you are able to regrow them, your cells should be more resilient. There's another measurement there's 4 or 5 other measurements in there too, but telomeres is an interesting one because it's very easy to measure. The test is cheap; it's like $100 test, and so I'm pretty happy with that. And
what did you do specifically to improve, to go from, as I read on sort of a post, from your sort of natural age to a much younger age on your telomeres?
Well, when you're in this kind of hacking environment, you do a bunch of different things, and it's kind of hard sometimes to correlate exactly which things are doing what. I just do everything that I think I've read enough science to believe will be beneficial. But specifically targeting telomeres, probably the one thing I did was to take this Russian peptide called epithion, and it's been researched quite well, about 40 years in Russia. There's a ton of research on it. The patent is owned by a Russian company, and they will not license it to an American company. So it will unlikely be available as an American drug company because the Russians won't give it to us.
And how do you take it, or how did you take it?
So how I took epithion, so I've done 4 cycles of epithion, and the way I did it was you get a 100 milligram vial of it, and it becomes freeze dried, and you reconstitute it with bariostatic water, and then you inject 1 milliliter, which is 10 milligrams of epithion subcutaneously every day for 10 days. So you stick yourself in the stomach with a needle, and part of all of this thing, a year ago, you would have never gotten me to stick myself in the stomach with a needle, but I've done it 40 times for the epithion. So I did separated by 2 months apart, 4 cycles of 10 days of epithion, and each cycle I think gave me 4 or 5 years of telomere growth.
And if we think about just something like that, how did you find out about it? How do you mentally validate it? And how do you then think about prescribing and using for yourself? And I know you've done lots of different kinds of therapies. So walk somebody through that sort of mental process of discovery, validation, prescription, as it were, and then in your particular case, sort of measurement and improvement.
Well, to be full disclosure, of course, I'm not a doctor. I never have been a doctor. I haven't played doctor on TV. I'm a hacker. I'm a guy interested in this kind of thing. I am a big advocate of people taking control of their own biology and making their own decisions based on the data that they have, but based on actual data, as opposed to just somebody on an internet forum said this is interesting. So actually, the way I found out about epithion first was from Dave, and he pointed me to some research. So the first thing I did is I read probably 10 studies that had been done, persons, rat studies, this and that, and I convinced myself that there had been enough science that there was unlikely that there were no material side effects. Some of these things that you read about will list, crazy side effects, like this guy grew a 4th eyeball or something like that. And this one, the 10 studies I read noted basically no downside on it, and some interesting potential positive things. And it had been used in human clinical trials at one time in America. So I was like, oh, okay. potential good upside, no identified downside, 30 years of research, but no American pharmaceutical company behind it. There are market reasons why it's not available. Even setting aside all the conspiracy theories that this kind of mechanism, if it works, could get rid of a whole category of drugs where drug companies make money. I mean, once you get into some of this, especially the regenerative medicine stuff and the stem cell stuff, when you start talking about curing cancer and curing diseases and making people materially more resilient and healthier on a broad scale, there's a lot of resistance to that in the existing medical community, pharmaceutical stuff, because they make most of their money on maintenance of things like diabetes and cancer and symptomatic things. So curing diseases is not in the economic interest of anyone here. And so, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to understand that. So I basically read the original research myself, heard about it from Dave, and then said, okay, that's something I'll try. And I set up my own study. I took the test before, did it, and everything that I've tried to come up with some kind of measurement mechanism to see if it works for me. Because even if you read the general research and it works in a mouse study or whatever, I mean, here was one of my first problems. I mean, I'm not a researcher or anything, but how do you convert a mouse model to a human model? If you go and read what the National Institutes of Health tells you to do, they basically say take the mouse dosage per kilogram and divide it by 100, and that's the human thing. But they have no science behind that. It's not related to the efficacy of the particular drug. They're just like, we're trying to be conservative as scientists, so that's what we're going to do. So figuring out when a drug's been tested on mice, the dosage for a human is really hard. I don't know if my dosage was right, but I read 4 or 5 different conversion models and picked one myself, and then I just did it. Mm-hmm. But since I was doing my own study, testing before and after, I figured I'd figure out whether the dosage was right or not. But
while we're on the subject of sort of dosage and supplementation, tell us about your experience with NAD.
So
first of all, maybe explain what that is, what you expected to have happen, and then your experience with it.
Yeah. So throughout this whole sort of journey process, I've discovered a ton of things that are elements in my biology and that relate to how well you're able to show up in life and your overall health and stuff, and that I had no idea. Like 2 years ago, I didn't know what a telomere was. I didn't know how to regrow. I didn't know the benefits of having long or short telomeres. NAD is one of those things too. So NAD is, I actually don't know. It's
We'll get it later. We'll get it later.
It's a long word. It's basically vitamin B3, and it's been studied and around for a long time. It hasn't been. It's a pharmaceutical thing. You have to have a prescription, so I would not recommend anyone take it without a doctor's order. But it is also something that is already in your system. It's a coenzyme in 3 different cycles in the body, the primary one being the Krebs Cycle, which creates ATP in your mitochondria. So, and it's a coenzyme in that it's kind of like oil that's a lubricant for the cell doing its work, and for example, in the Krebs Cycle to create ATP. It's also something that the body consumes or can get degenerated if you drink a lot of alcohol or opiates. So probably 98% of the NAD research that's ever been done out there has been around alcohol and opiate addiction and recovery, because it is amazing for getting rid of the cravings and for rebuilding people's mitochondrial function, because that's the primary because NAD levels are the primary thing that get destroyed during addiction. So probably a 95% cure rate addiction treatment with NAD now is 10 days of NAD IVs, 8 hours a day, 1,500 milligrams a day for 10 days. It has a 95% cure rate. There's lots of people using it for that. But the way it works is and there's not a very good test for NAD levels that are low, but if you have low NAD levels, what happens is your cells don't work very well. So you have brain fog, you have weird cravings, you have depression. It's because it's a fuel source for your cells to do their job. Like all cellular function is degraded in the body when your NAD levels are low. We're actually working with a company right now to get an over-the-counter clinical NAD test level. There's all sorts of problems with stability of the blood and oxidation and false positives and blah, blah, blah. But if we could come up with a test, it would be amazing, because then someone could come in and they say, I have all these crazy symptoms, and you test their NAD levels and you go, oh my God, you have 90% of your NAD is gone. Let's start there and then see what happens. So let me tell you what happened with me. I wasn't walking around saying, oh my God, I have an NAD problem. But I did, the first time I did 5 NAD IVs in 5 days, the first time I did it. Because I heard about NAD, and I took a similar path. I was like, oh, NAD, what is it? How does it work? Oh, it's in the Krebs cycle, and it's required for cell function. So if you're trying to look, in my sort of idea around longevity, I look for a lot of elements that are sort of foundational in the body across many things, and I figure if I can keep those underlying systems working well, you'll address a lot of the issues that turn out to be symptomatic up above. So telomere length is one of those. If all your telomeres grow, like all your cells are more resilient. NAD levels, like if you increase your NAD levels and your cells can function better, you think better, you can run faster, you can, your immune system works better, all of your cells work faster. So I said, okay, let me try to work on that one. So I did 5 NAD IVs in 5 days, and I didn't know my before levels and my after levels because there's no test. But I noticed a bunch of things change pretty quickly. I do a cognitive test. There's an app called Brain Check that checks executive function, short and long-term memory, stuff like that. After those 5 IVs, my executive function went up 200%. My short and long-term memory went up 300%. A lot of cognitive improvements. And it was just, I think, because the levels of the receptors of NAD had been filled up. And when you call on your brain to do the work, like thinking, it's able to get the energy and the enzymes that it needs to run the Krebs cycle and create the ATP quicker. So you're able to do that.
I really like the fact that you blog about a lot of this stuff, and I read that blog post, which is really good, in both in terms of what was your hypothesis, what did you test, what did you measure, and so I appreciate that. The blog post will include a link to that in the show notes for sure.
Oh, good. Thanks. Yeah, so NAD has turned out to be one of those foundational things that I'm trying to pay attention to and work on. There's 3 ways that I look at supplementing NAD right now. I have done NAD IVs, and those are kind of expensive, but they're something that you would want to do if you've never done any of it. You'd want to do 3 or 4 NAD IVs to get, because most people's levels are down, and you should just do a couple IVs to get it up. Second thing you can do is to take an NAD precursor product, and there's 2 major ones. The one is a True Niagen, which is something we sell. It's an NR precursor. The other one is Elysium Basis, which is basically the same thing, an NR precursor. And if you look at all the science behind, Elysium Basis, they're saying the same thing, which is NAD is the longevity molecule, because it is supporting all cell functions. It's keeping all your cells more resilient. And Basis, again, is like True Niagen, is a precursor, and what it's doing is giving your body more of the precursor chemicals so that it can create more of its own NAD. And it's been proven with True Niagen and Basis that by taking that on a regular basis every day, you can increase your levels 20 or 30%. But that's kind of a daily supplement maintenance type thing that is encouraging your body to create more NAD. That's good, and something everybody should do. I encourage everybody to take a NAD sort of precursor thing, because that's just helping your body create more of it. And then the third way that I take it sometimes is subcutaneously. You can inject 100 milligrams of NAD. If you have a day where you want to just get shit fucking done, you inject yourself 100 milligrams of NAD, you will have the ability to focus and get work done. It's not a stimulant. That's the other cool thing about it. So it's not like caffeine, or it's not like, cocaine or opiates or anything like that. Since it's a coenzyme, you basically have more oil and lubricant in your body to do whatever it is you want to do. So if you've got to like do a presentation, you got to think, you got to be like on. I probably should have done one before I did this podcast. But if you want to be really on, you will be on literally 30 or 40% better with some NAD.
We'll have you back tomorrow. You go do that tonight. You come back tomorrow.
Right.
We'll be 30 or 40% better.
All right.
And let's get back a little bit to Bulletproof Labs.
Sure.
So give everyone sort of a quick summary of Bulletproof Labs, a couple of the most sort of useful therapies that are there, especially with a focus on longevity.
Okay, cool. So Bulletproof Labs is sort of Dave's first biohacking facility. So it's a place where you can go and actually experience biohacking technologies that are shortcuts for different kinds of things. So we have exercise shortcuts, we have brain training shortcuts, we have immune system function things, we have supplementation. The first location's in Santa Monica. It's a personal trainer model. So when you go in, you get a biohacker tech that can help explain and help guide your journey through these different technologies. We'll talk to you about whatever goals you have. Do you want to sleep better? Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to? There's all different things you can control in your biology, and we'll put together a program that goes through the machines that helps you meet your goals. And the kind of people that come into Bulletproof Labs fall into basically three categories. One are people who have some kind of chronic autoimmune non-responsive disease, autoimmune people, Hashimoto's disease people, hyperthyroiditis people who have not been well served by the current medical system and want some symptomatic relief and try some new therapies. And we have things that can help them. The technologies that those people tend to use relate to immune system function generally. And the technologies we have there are things like cryotherapy. So that's where we freeze you to negative 240 degrees. And have you ever done cryotherapy?
I have not.
Well, the idea of all these technologies is to give the body the minimum viable stimulus that it needs to restart or to redo what you're trying to get the body to do. And what cryotherapy does is try to reboot your immune system. So when you stand in negative 240 degrees cryotherapy, like you're standing in liquid nitrogen, the immune system or the autonomic nervous system says, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to go into hypothermia. So it turns off, puts all the blood back to the heart. And but you're only in there for 3 minutes, so you don't actually damage any tissue or cause any damage. You step out, then your immune system goes, holy crap, I didn't die, turn back on and goes into overdrive. And so what you've done is boosted your immune system function. It's a common thing for pro athletes, especially in Europe, to do after a game like a soccer game or rugby game or something like that, because the bottom line is that they've found that they're able to perform at a higher level the next day because after you do a big workout, your immune system is what is doing the recovery, fixing the muscles and the soreness and the inflammation and all of that stuff. And if it takes its sweet time on it, it might not be done by the next day you play. But if you go into cryotherapy, you boost the function by 50% because you shock the body, then it gets its work done faster. That's so if you're trying to improve immune system function, giving the body a shock to encourage it to turn up the immune activity, that's what cryotherapy does.
So that's for the autoimmune people. Category 2 is?
So category 2 is people who have had some kind of injury and want to recover faster. So we have people with traumatic brain injuries, which are really hard things to do any kind of physical therapy for. We've had people that came in after surgery for stem knees. We had one guy come in, had both his knees done with titanium knees. Doctor said you're going to have a 2-month recovery. You're going to be in a wheelchair for 2 months. After 3 days, he's walking with a cane. We have some pretty advanced recovery technologies there. The traumatic brain injury, this person came in, she'd had been in a car wreck, had a concussion. We did a brain scan on her, and her brain was all freaking scrambled. After 3 weeks, she got all of her cognitive function. She couldn't concentrate for more than 2 minutes. She couldn't balance. She was a pop star, like singer, and did like rap dancing videos. She didn't have balance because of her TBI. In 3 weeks, she was back to doing her own videos, and she could do all of her dances. And her brain scan cleared up because there was basically misfiring in her brain. And the technologies we used for her were mostly, and for this guy, the recovery people are pulsed electromagnetic fields, PEMF. which is resetting the electrical charge in your cells, increasing circulation. Also, exercise with oxygen. So EWAT, have you done that? Mm-hmm. So with the mask, and what that's doing is flooding the brain and the system with oxygen. Oxygen gets rid of a lot of inflammation type issues. And infrared light therapy. We have 2 infrared light beds, and that stimulates a lot of hormone production and repair things in the extremes. Then the third category of people are people who just generally want to perform better in life. They want to, busy executives that want to think better, deal with their stress in their lives better. People that want to have a workout that takes less time, be more efficient with their time in the gym, lose weight, something like that. It's the category of people that have a specific goal that they want to improve, but they want to do it faster and more efficiently. And for those people, we have a weight workout that in 12 minutes replaces 2 hours of weight training. We use the ARX machine. Have you ever? Yeah. So you're lifting weights against a computer and you're loading the negative 3 times faster. So you're you can do 5 reps on this thing and you're freaking finished. But it's the most efficient weight resistance training you can get. It's a $120,000 machine. We have another machine that's cold hit machine that gives you a 3-hour workout in 20 minutes. And it uses cold and compression to concentrate lactic acid. And so what it does is concentrate lactic acid at the level of what you would if you ran a marathon, but does it in 20 minutes. So your pituitary gland responds to get rid of the lactic acid levels that it thinks you ran a marathon, but you only did it in 20 minutes. So you get the benefits of 3 hours of exercise in 20 minutes. And that, if you're trying to lose weight quickly, if you're trying to just recover, some of the injury people, but you just want a really super efficient workout, that's for that kind of thing.
On 2 ends of the spectrum, one end being what things that are sort of happening at Bulletproof now are closest to getting what I would call mainstream in normal health or prevention. And then the other end of the spectrum, which is like, what are the things that you and Dave are sort of experimenting with that are on the bleeding edge as we think about all of us leading and slowly commoditizing and making more accessible. So what are the things that are closest to accessibility for sort of the Joe everyday, I think, as you talked about?
Well, probably the things that are closest are the first things that Dave started on. And I think Dave was one of the early guys talking about good fats and ketosis and the benefits of adding more good fats to your diet. And that ended up with Bulletproof coffee, which is butter and coconut oil in coffee, and good quality snacks that don't produce an insulin response, and basically over-the-counter things that replace current things you could buy, but that are better for you, mostly around the getting more good fats in your diet and getting less refined carbohydrates and things like that. So those are definitely available and growing. The main company at Bulletproof that makes the coffee and the fat waters and the protein bars is growing at 60% a year in Whole Foods, and that's really changing. I mean, they're like the number 1 coffee vendor now at Whole Foods, and their water product, fat water, is starting to do really well. That's probably the most accessible stuff along these lines of just basically putting products in categories that today have bad products and putting better quality products in there. Coffee without mold in it, water that has, some good fats in it for you, protein bars that don't produce an insulin response, things like that. Those are most available and doing really well. The stuff that's much more leading edge, it's probably around, but close is around this NAD. There's another one that we're working on.
I like the look on your face, which is like, should I talk about this one? This one might be a little too far out there, but it's exactly what we want to hear about. Oh, I even like it better with a sigh.
Okay, this one is out there. So NAD is we're doing a lot of work on NAD, and there'll be more over-the-counter NAD things, more clinical procedures around NAD, more research. But that's going to be something that you have to have prescribed. The next sort of major performance enhancer that is beneficial that could be over-the-counter is nicotine, and nicotine has bad rap because it's in cigarettes. But if you look at nicotine as just a standalone chemical, and you can actually make artificial nicotine that doesn't come from tobacco, it's very good for your cognitive function. It's good for growing vascular, new neural connections, growing new veins and stuff like that. You'll see Dave walking around with a Nicorette mist spray and spraying 1 milligram of nicotine in his mouth all the time. I think you're going to see a lot more focus on the medically sustainable benefits of nicotine separate from cigarettes. I mean, it is probably the best over-the-counter stimulant drug versus caffeine. I mean, it has as many benefits as caffeine, but it's been maligned. And we're going to do quite a bit to bring the science behind nicotine.
Are you doing at Bulletproof Labs? Are you also planning? So we've obviously talked about the physical nature of that.
Yeah.
Are you also planning at Bulletproof or others or other places where you could imagine the types of therapies you described that are much more medically oriented? I go to this place and do my IV. I do this place where I'm having my subcutaneous injections. I go to this other place where you now have a much more sophisticated regimen around that type of more clinical work.
Yes, that's what Bulletproof Labs is. Bulletproof Main Corporation coffee, protein bars is going to be things you can buy in Whole Foods, Safeway, QFC, sort of standard mainstream distribution. Bulletproof Labs is where all of the crazy ideas that Dave has, that are more clinical or where you have to come and go and use expensive equipment are going to be. And that is going to include even potentially some products that would not be initially accepted by mainstream distribution, like our nicotine ideas. I mean, that's not something that Whole Foods is going to want to put in first. That's going to go out through a clinical network like Bulletproof Labs, where we've got members that are looking for and searching out these really leading edge technologies. And we talked earlier about stem cells. Our clinical stuff right now, we have mostly Myers cocktails, IVs, and blood tests, and NAD IVs in our clinic. But we are putting together upgraded and proprietary versions of some next generation clinical procedures that are in the regenerative medicine space. Now, we're going to be a clinic, so we're not a consultative doctor. We've got a medical director, but we're not a place where you come in, you get a diagnosis for something, and he works a particular regimen to cure a disease. We're going to be a clinic where we have standardized procedures that have been proven to work in populations, but are targeted at specific things. So let me tell you some of the areas that we're working on. So we were talking about stem cells earlier. We're working on V-cell enabled versions of a couple of standard regenerative medicine procedures. Are you familiar with the O-shot and P-shot?
No. Well, first tell us what V cells are, and then O-shot and P-shot.
Okay, so in the stem cell world, there are 3 standard places you can get stem cells, and a 4th that is new. You can get adipose stem cell, extract stem cells from adipose tissue, which is your fat. You can get them from bone marrow, and you can get them from cord blood. Adipose and bone marrow are allowed by the FDA and regulated, even though they're starting to clamp down on adipose. But cord blood is not allowed in America yet, which puts America behind. And cord blood is probably the most efficacious stem cells because they're the youngest stem cells versus the adipose and even the bone marrow ones. They've recently discovered V cells, which are virgin cells, stem cells, which are in the blood and are passed to you from your mother, but they're not active, and they need to be activated to be turned on, and they can be activated with disease, but they've also recently found that you can extract them from the blood and activate them with a laser. And so you can turn them, and they're smaller. Normal mycelium, I'll say it wrong, but like adipose stem cells are 15 microns large. V cells are 3 microns. And most of the blood vessels to the extremities are 5 microns. So having much smaller stem cells that can get out to the extremities is very good for stem cell treatments. So there are many clinical regenerative medicine procedures today that are standardized and done at scale, like the O-shot, the P-shot, the vampire facial. I'm sure you've heard of the vampire facial. So those are done with a technique today which is called PRP. So they extract the blood, red blood cells, they spin out the PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma from the blood, and then they'll do a procedure with it. In the vampire facial, what they do is microneedle inject it into the face, and that PRP regenerates the collagen in the face and gives you sort of 4 or 5 years younger looking skin. So and the FDA completely approves these kind of procedures because you're taking your blood and you're re-injecting it to yourself. So the problem they have with things like cord blood is that you're taking somebody else's blood and putting it in another person, and so the bioidentical nature and all the issues with the compatibility, so they But any of these procedures where you're taking one person's blood out and giving it back to them in some upgraded form are generally okay for the FDA. People have been doing tons of PRP. They do PRP for hair growth too. They'll inject it into the head for people with, and it'll regenerate hair and things like that. They're using PRP for the O-shot and the P-shot, which is sexual regeneration. The O-shot is for the woman, the P-shot's for the man, and it has a rejuvenating effect on that area. Now, those are standard clinical rejuvenative procedures, but they're using PRP. Now, what we've done is found a way to do those same procedures, but with V cells. And so instead of adding the PRP back in, you're activating the stem cells, the V cells, and using those in a vampire facial or in an O-shot or P-shot. And what we're finding in the vampire facial is that with a PRP vampire facial, a person will look 4 or 5 years younger. With a V cell upgraded facial, they'll look 12 years younger.
So someone can get an upgraded vampire facial.
Yes. So that's where Bulletproof Labs is going, is taking that next step in the regenerative medicine category to give upgraded versions of current clinical procedures in the regenerative medicine space.
Martin, I noticed you're wearing an Aura ring. Can you tell us what that is, what it does, and what you learned from it?
So disclosure, I'm an investor in Aura Ring, the company. But that goes into the category for me of making it super simple to collect as much data as you can in a passive, sort of easy way. The idea of putting an activity tracker on has always been appealing to me. The problem with most activity trackers like Fitbit and the Apple Watch and things like that is the sample rate. Those sample at 15 or 20 hertz. And when you go to the doctor and you get your pulse check, they put something on your finger because this pulse signal from your finger is much more accurate than the pulse signal from your wrist. And the Aura Ring is the only device that goes on the finger, and it samples at 200 hertz. So it has the ability, its quality of the signal is much higher, so you can do things like HRV calculation. You cannot do HRV calculation with a Fitbit because it samples at 15 hertz. And if what you're trying to do is figure out the time between a heartbeat at 15 hertz, 15 times a second, or a minute, if you are beating at 60 beats a minute, you're missing like every third beat in your Fitbit. If you're sampling at 200 hertz, you're getting enough of a sample rate to do the HRV. So that's why I like the Aura, is that it has a much higher quality signal. They have a good API, and it is passively collecting all of this data all the time that I'm then using to see the results of different things. For example, the first time I did cryotherapy, I noticed that my deep sleep went up quite a bit, about 300% up, and that's because my body went into recovery mode. But I saw it in the data because I saw the difference in deeper and REM sleep versus light sleep over time. And that was just data that I got because I'm wearing this thing and I didn't have to do anything extra.
And so with your Aura, you're doing regular heart rate, you're doing HRV, and it's measuring sleep and sleep quality as well,
yes.
all passively.
All passively, and that really helps me figure out, different things that I'm doing and whether I'm ready for a hard workout. And how that's working with somewhere like Bulletproof Labs is we're trying to create a place where we have some state information about our members when they walk in the door. When you walk into most gyms, you go to a place like Orange Theory, which I love, by the way, they put a heart rate monitor on you, and your only goal is to do more than you did last time. They're always pushing you for higher and higher intensity, regardless of your state. But if they knew that last night you had 3 margaritas and you slept really like crap and your HRV is off, you should not do a high intensity workout today. Maybe you should do a recovery day. You have that data. That data is available to you if you had access. And something like Aura will give that to you. And at Bulletproof Labs, that's what we're trying to do is to extract this data. The quantified self movement that was has been around has collected a lot of data, but not a lot of actionable. It hasn't converted it to the actionable stuff. And one of the things we're trying to do at Bulletproof Labs is to make that conversion, to make it useful. And HRV is one of the measurements that can do that, because it can tell you when you get up in the morning, okay, I'm scheduled to go do a high intensity weight training workout, but my HRV says I should do something else. Therefore, I'm going to change my routine today to respond to the actual state of my body. When people start working out and making decisions in their life based on the data and the actual state, they're going to end up living much more happier lives. They're going to be injured less. They're going to not have overtraining issues. It's going to be a much better way to make decisions about what you do in life, instead of just oh my God, you got to beat your heart rate from last week.
Is that something you do with your Aura?
Yes.
So you make different choices. I might wake up, I might
Yes.
check my resting heart rate or HRV,
Yes.
a recovery score, as it were, and from that, I'm actually going to sleep in today instead of going to the gym, or I'm going
Absolutely.
to change the nature of my workout, or I'm going to change the nature of my recovery post-workout.
Yes. I make different decisions based on the data that's the actual state, because I've got some devices that are passive, that are collecting data, that are giving me state data all the time.
What are some things that you've done or sort of included in your normal routine that everybody else can sort of include in their normal routine, which you've learned from all of this experimentation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Other than sleep more, green leafy vegetables, drink more water.
Yeah, well, I have a morning routine that includes meditation, morning pages, journaling, and supplements, but supplements that are specific based on my blood work. And I would encourage everyone to have a routine that, and anyone can have a routine that does that. You should have a supplementation routine that is responsive to whatever your blood work is. I mean, for example, I had my 23andMe DNA thing tested and found out that I have a methylation cycle error that means that my body doesn't metabolize B vitamins very well, so I have to get B injections. I used to take a lot of B orally, but it turns out it wasn't doing anything for me because I found out the data. So I think everyone can find their data and optimize their supplementation routine to respond to what there is actually going on. Also, the meditation and journaling, I think, being able to start the day with gratitude or with some calm and equanimity rather than going straight into your, iPhone and answering the tasks for the day, having that break in the morning and that time where you connect a little bit with the subconscious and planning time for that. I didn't used to do that, 5 or 6 years ago, because I was always just get stuff done. But what I found is that by sort of enabling and allowing myself to take that break, it's actually made all the other time much more productive. So I think anyone can meditate in the morning, and making time for 20 minutes. I do generally twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning and the night.
Do you do anything to assist it? Use an app for that?
About half the time I do use some technology to encourage to make the meditation better. About half the time I use a mantra-based meditation. But the technology I do use is a thing called the David Delight Pro, and it's light and sound goggles. So it's playing binaural beats, and it has a particular frequency of light in the sound, and it has electrostimulus on the ears. And what it does is get your brain into an alpha state faster, because alpha is between 10 and 14 hertz, and we know the frequency of the brain waves that alpha is in, and the point of going into meditation is to get you into alpha. And whether you're doing a mantra, whether you're doing guided meditation or whatever, they're all trying to get you into that, your brain synchronized at between 10 and 14 hertz. Well, there's technology that will get your brain synchronized there faster, and I don't do it all the time, about half the time, but I would encourage people to use some of the technologies that are out there, like the David Delight, and I think the Muse does that too. I don't like the Muse as much, but there are technologies that will make meditation more efficient and uses light and sound to get your brain into the right place faster. So I'd encourage people to look at those. But the thing I encourage most people to do is to really just take more control of your own destiny. I mean, you're only a product of all the decisions you make, and you should analyze what decisions you're making, and are they the right ones for you? And do you have the data to make the right decisions, or are you just responding to cultural influences or things that you always used to do? And are those things still working for you? The things I do now for workout and brain training and all sorts of things are very different than I did 10 years ago. It's because I'm a different person. And I would encourage everyone to do that analysis and, try to figure out what makes them a better person every day.
Martin, thanks a lot for joining us. Where can people find out more about you online and Bulletproof Labs online?
My blog, which is mostly my personal thoughts about what I should do for myself, it's not really a public blog, but is at deepgreencrystals.com. And Bulletproof Labs is at www.bulletprooflabs.com.
Great. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to another episode of How to Live to 200. Thank you so much for joining me and exploring this world together. I get a ton of help from the L200 crew that includes Lauren Krayinsky, Sam Matera, Troy Strandquist, and Kevin Kirkpatrick. The theme music is composed by Emmett McCann. Yes, that's my nephew. You can learn more about this and other episodes at our website, livingto200.com, or find us on Twitter or Instagram at howtolivето200. where we post lots of photos of cool things. It's early days for this podcast, so we would appreciate any and all comments or telling a friend or two about what we're doing over here. It might be irresponsible for you to keep it a secret. Until next time, eat right, get lots of sleep, keep good numbers, and be looking around the corner for the next big breakthrough. If we're going to live a long time, we better do it well.